After the abolition of the Nepalese monarchy in 2006, a small yet significant problem arose. What will be our new national anthem? During the period of monarchic rule, the national anthem of Nepal was the song Shriman Gambhir. Like the UK's God Save the King, the lyrics were an ode to the autocrat, a glorification and reverence of the sovereign of the nation. Ideals that were seen as laughable when just 1 year prior, in 2005, King Gyanendra Shah had tried to assume absolute power through a failed coup. A coup so incredibly unpopular that it ended up uniting the Maoist insurrectionists with the parliamentary forces in order to end his tyranny and later end the civil war. After receiving over 1,000 submissions from all across the country, the song Sonyo Tunga Fulka by poet Vyakul Maila was chosen as the hymn of the new republic. The new anthem, from the very first line, celebrated the Nepalese people. The song was a reminder of one of Nepal's greatest strengths: national unity through cultural diversity.
Nepal's police clash with pro-monarchy demonstrators. At least 2 people have been killed in the violence.
On March 28, 2025, around 4,000 counter-protesters gathered in Kathmandu with the goal of disrupting a rally put on by the Socialist Front. Emboldened by a speech published on Nepal's Democracy Day by the opportunist former King Gyanendra Shah,
त्यति मात्र होइन, हामीले जनताको भलो होस् भनेर आफ्नो ओहदा र सुख सुविधालाई पनि त्याग गरेका हौं। त्यागले कसैको कद सानो हुने होइन र त्यस्तो भावलाई कसैले पनि कमजोरी ठान्नु हुँदैन।
and Gyanendra's meeting with Uttar Pradesh Chief Minister and zealous demagogue of the BJP, Yogi Adityanath. Carrying Nepalese flags and the saffron flag of the Hindutva ideology, these counter-protesters clashed with Kathmandu police. As rocks and debris were thrown, the police responded with water cannons, rubber bullets, and tear gas. Hundreds were injured, buildings were set on fire, and 2 people were killed. Amidst the violence and chaos, a simple yet venomous chant could be heard: Raja Aao, Desh Bachao. While reactionary elements continue to exist throughout Nepalese culture, in the political sphere, the progressive ideologies of the Social Democrat Nepali Congress and the communist Emale and Maoiwadi have held a firm grasp. Though it's important to keep in mind that these 3 major parties of Nepal keep their power less because they are ideologically committed, but more to do with the legacy of what the parties have done for the nation. Congress were a prominent factor in Nepal's liberation from the Rana oligarchy, and it was also the party of B.P. Koirala, seen to many as the father of modern Nepal. Emale was created through the unification of the Communist Party of Nepal Marxists, the party of beloved communist figure Madan Bhandari, with various other smaller communist parties to take part in the 1990 democratic revolution against the Panchayat absolute monarchy. And the Maoiwadi, the youngest of the 3, not only started an armed proletarian revolution, but were a major factor in the dissolution of the monarchy, a topic I went more in depth in my previous video. Since 2008, the government of Nepal has jumped between one of these 3 parties, and as more Nepalese citizens continue to leave the country, it is a common belief that these parties have failed at ensuring a proper standard of living for the people. So does it come as a surprise that the people of Nepal are exhausted by the constant appeals to progress, to socialism, and to democracy when it's blatantly obvious that the parties that espouse these ideals are opportunists, bastardizing Marxist theory with the goal of attaining and maintaining power rather than using the framework of the various existing socialist nations to improve the state of the nation? Are we surprised that the Nepalese people have lost faith in Marxism and socialism and are beginning to shift towards a fascistic ideology like Hindutva? Well, the geographic area of modern and historical Nepal has always had a multicultural, religiously diverse population. It would be ignorant to deny the strong influence Hinduism has held throughout the country. But it wasn't until the unification of the nation by Prithvi Narayan Shah, who himself was a Caste Kshetri Hindu, that the foundation of Hinduism to become a state religion developed, one which would be spread throughout the nation, willingly or forcefully. And as the Rana oligarchy came into power, they exacerbated the Hinduification of the nation through religious persecution of non-Hindus and the incorporation of a strict Nepal-oriented caste system that included the vast indigenous communities. This institutionalized Hindu supremacy would remain the foundation of governance throughout Nepalese history. Even after multiple revolutions and political reforms, Hinduism remains a dominant social force. With the rise of Hindu nationalism, Hindutva in India, this fascistic ideology has begun to seep into Nepalese politics. Led by Nepal's nationalist party, the RPP, and their goal being the reinstitution of the Shah dynasty as heads of state, it's clear that this new political wave is adamant on regressing an already desperate nation to an age of cruelty and intolerance. The origins of the Hindutva ideology are rooted in India's colonial period. When the East India Company took over administrative power in what would be modern-day East Bengal, it was necessary for the company to establish laws and regulations that had to do with how the natives would be governed, and most importantly, how wealth and land would be inherited and taxed. So, in 1772, under the leadership of Warren Hastings and in collaboration with comprador Brahmins and Muslims, the East India Company would develop two sets of laws. One that was based on the Quran that would govern the Muslim population, and one that would govern the rest of the population that was based on the ancient Vedic texts of the Manusmriti. These laws divided the population into two groups, Muslims and Hindus, with the Hindu category itself divided, ranging from Rama-worshipping devout Brahmins to the plethora of tribal groups that followed their own indigenous religions. Not only were much of the Indian population now under the laws of a text that most of them had never read, but Brahmins were the only caste that were permitted and able to read the Sanskrit-written holy texts, so of course they made sure they benefited the most when codifying the modern interpretations into law. Sanskritic Hinduism was made to define a whole range of heterogeneous practices, and were then lumped together to constitute a single religious tradition termed Hinduism. It would be this Sanskritic Hinduism that would become the impetus of the Hindu nationalist or Hindutva movement. It would especially strike a chord with the new upper caste Brahmins born into colonial rule. Educated in Hindu schools partly funded by the colonial administration and later participants in the colonial apparatus, though in a limited capacity, this new class of the colonized intellectual would take on a passionate quest for a national culture prior to the colonial era. Fully aware they are in the process of losing themselves, and consequently being lost to their people, these men work away with raging hearts and furious mind to renew contact with their people's oldest inner essence, the farthest removed from colonial times. A mystification of an India that was purely Hindu before the invasion of Muslims and Christians would develop, and with it a nationalist belief that India is a Hindu nation. During India's colonial era, prominent Hindutva organizations like the Hindu Mahasabha and the Rashtriya Swamsevak Sangh would be founded. Hindu Mahasabha, founded in 1915 as the orthodox Hindu wing of the Indian Congress, later becoming an independent organization in the 1930s, was a prominent early actor in the growth of the Hindutva ideology, with V.D. Savarkar, the writer of Essentials of Hindutva, being a prominent member. The RSS was founded in 1925 by K.V. Hedgewar, who himself was inspired by the writings of Savarkar. The RSS are a paramilitary organization, with their political wing being the Bharatiya Janata Party, the BJP. The RSS were and still are heavily influenced by the fascist parties of Germany and Italy, not only in the way they dress, very uniform and militaristic, but also in the words they use, with M.S. Golwalkar, the leader of the RSS from 1940 to 1976, writing, "German race pride has now become the topic of the day. To keep up the purity of the race and its culture, Germany shocked the world by her purging the country of the Semitic races, the Jews. Race pride at its highest has been manifested here. Germany has also shown how well nigh impossible it is for races and cultures having differences going to the root to be assimilated into one united whole. A good lesson for us in Hindustan to learn and profit by." The RSS and BJP aren't and weren't ever shy of their xenophobic beliefs, specifically Islamophobia, with Golwalkar being opposed to the Quit India movement due to the Hindu-Muslim cooperation, and the BJP of today utilizing culture war type rhetoric to villainize Muslims, like their idea of love jihad, which was promoted by the BJP MPs to ensure Hindu girls aren't seduced by evil Muslim boys who will marry them to convert and bolster the Muslim population.
अपनी लड़कियों को सुरक्षित रखो, अपने घर में हथियार रखो, कुछ नहीं तो सब्जी काटने वाला चाकू जरा तेज रखो.
This is the replacement theory, but
it was not a theory, it's a reality. The Canadian population, like the American population, the European population, replaced.
Violent harassment and outright lynchings of Muslims have also become a not so uncommon reality in places like Uttar Pradesh and Gujarat, where the BJP and RSS hold an immense amount of political power. Hinduism developed in India within the context of a colonial occupation. By dividing the nation into Hindus and Muslims, Hinduism was used as a uniting factor by the nationalists for the non-Muslim natives of India, who prior to the British invasion wouldn't even have seen each other as one nation state or people. And as a result, you have this creation of a siege Hinduism, a homogeneous Hinduism that believes itself to be under attack by the outsiders who took advantage of the passivity and tolerance of the Vedic religions, and now the Hindus must rise to the level of the aggressor and fight to protect the sanctity of their holy land. So how did Hinduism in a Hindu kingdom differ to that of colonial India? Surprisingly, or not so much to some, religion was still used to organize society into a strict hierarchical order that could be utilized by the ruling class to ensure that the lower class are kept divided and subservient. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself, as Nepal had 3 major historical events that would lead Hinduism to becoming an overarching political institution. The fall of Chittor, the seat of governance of the Mewar kingdom by the hands of the Delhi Sultanate, brought waves of zealous Rajput refugees into the hills of Nepal, and with that, into the employment of multiple hill kingdoms between the 12th and 14th century. The Rajput people had a reputation of being proud fighters and shrewd administrators, so they were quickly welcomed into the administrations of many of the hill kingdoms that were scattered throughout greater Nepal. And as the Rajputs made themselves indispensable to these petty kingdoms, they slowly amassed the political power necessary for some of these petty kingdoms to be taken over completely from the inside. With this came a progressive Sanskritization of not only the states they specifically took absolute control over, but also kingdoms like the Mullas of Kathmandu, who, under King Jayastiti Mulla, knowingly incorporated the Rajput style of governance, including the division of the entire populace of Kathmandu into 4 distinct castes. The adoption of the caste system by the Mullas was done to allocate the urban housing of the city towards those of the upper caste, while those of the lower caste were pushed to the outskirts. When Prithvi Narayan Shah, the unifier and first king of Nepal, who himself was said to be of Rajput descent, conquered and shifted the capital of his kingdom to Kathmandu in 1768, he adopted the royal banner of Badgaon, introduced by Jayastiti Mulla, the red banner, as the highest flag. He referred to Nepal as Asali Hindustan, the real land of the Hindus, and as a garden of 4 castes and 36 varnas. He desired national unification based on the premise, one nation, one religion, and one language. Prithvi Narayan Shah was a Caste Kshetri Hindu. The Caste people, originating from the western parts of Nepal, are an Indo-Aryan people who migrated to Nepal somewhere between the 1st millennium BCE and the middle of the 1st millennium CE. Originally followers of the deity Mashto, they later converted to Buddhism, and then finally Hinduism. By the time of Prithvi Narayan Shah, the Caste people had their very own caste system. Split between 2 groups, you were either a thread wearer, a bound Kshetri, or you were a untouchable, a Kami, Damai, Sarki. As more Tibeto-Burman, referred to as the indigenous or Janajati ethnicities, began to become subjugated by the Gorkhali, a new caste in between was created to categorize the Mongoloid tribes, called the alcohol drinkers. By incorporating the conquered ethnicities within the caste structure, caste became a fundamental part of the new kingdom's administration, with demotion to a lower caste being a valid form of punishment within the state. In 1846, Jung Bahadur Rana would consolidate complete control of the country under the title of Prime Minister, leaving the Shah kings as mere figureheads until 1951. The most far-reaching legacy of Jung Bahadur Rana is the Muluki Ain. The Muluki Ain, translated to the National Code, would be the basis for the legal, administrative, and economic system of Nepal until 1963. It was the combination of the 3 different caste systems that existed within the kingdom. The Khas caste system brought by the Gorkhali, the Newari caste system found in Kathmandu established by Jayastiti Mulla, and the Madhesi caste system found in the border regions between India and Nepal. It was also the evolution of Prithvi Narayan Shah's belief that Nepal would be ruled under one king, under one language, and under one religion. By giving some Janajati a higher status than others, even within their own communities, Ranas would create a loyal upper class that would work with them in the administrative positions within the government. This would also lead to state-sanctioned religious persecution, like the banishment of Buddhist monks and forced Hinduification of the Janajati ethnicities. Hinduism would become a unifying ideology of Nepal. Those at the top, the thread-wearing castes and the touchable Janajati, would enjoy more rights and freedoms, like the freedom to own land and later to give their children an education outside of their caste-based employment, while those of lower castes would be barred from social mobility and forced to erase aspects of their cultural identity, replacing it with the dominant Hindu culture. After the ousting of the Rana dynasty by democratic forces led by the Nepali Congress, Nepal would have a short-lived democratic period, ending in 1961 with King Mahendra's dissolution of parliament taking absolute control of the country.
यो मन्त्रीमण्डलले शान्ति सुरक्षा कायम गर्ने जस्तो हरेक सभ्य सरकारको प्राथमिक कर्तव्य पनि पूरा गर्न सकेन। प्रशासन यन्त्रको पुनर्गठन र सुधार गर्ने नाउँमा भएका मनमानी कार्यवाहीहरूबाट प्रशासन यन्त्र नै ठप्प बन्द हुने अवस्थामा पुगेको सबैलाई थाहै भएको कुरा हो।
This period, known as the Panchayat era, lasted 30 years, and one of the hallmarks of the absolute monarchy would be the promotion of nationalism, a continuation of the Rana's Hinduification campaign of the nation. Under the slogan Ek Raja, Ek Bes, Ek Bhasa, one king, one dress, one language, Khas language would be promoted as the lingua franca of the nation, as attempts to preserve and teach indigenous culture and language was seen as fostering communalism and anti-Nepali. The genuine basis for fascism is the petty bourgeoisie. After the dissolution of the Panchayat government in 1991, Nepal was thrust into the world of bourgeois democracy. With this jump into a new era came the reorganization of the, at the time, two largest political parties. Nepali Congress, Nepal's first political party, would go on to court the new comprador bourgeoisie and the old traditional land-owning classes that formerly benefited from the absolute monarchy of the Panchayat era. With this welcoming of the exploiting classes, Congress became the party of the elites. So, as a response, many of the small urban proletariat, the larger non-landowning peasantry, the national bourgeoisie, combined with the new petty bourgeoisie made up of the semi-autonomous landowning peasantry, would find refuge in the newly formed Communist Party of Nepal, United Marxist-Leninist, or YMLE. The reality of the petty bourgeoisie within the context of the class struggle, they can be swayed to either the direction of the proletariat or the bourgeoisie. To bring the petty bourgeoisie to its side, the proletariat must win its confidence, and for that, it must have confidence in its own strength. Throughout the period of Nepal's Maoist revolution, the victory of the Maoists throughout Nepal's vast rural infrastructure would shift sympathies of Nepal's indigenous and Dalit proletariat and petty bourgeoisie towards the side of the Maoists. When they murdered landlords or evicted them from villages, they created an atmosphere of terror. But there were also many instances when indigenous and lower caste groups genuinely felt a sense of liberation. The rebels earned gratitude and support when they punished those who perpetuated discriminatory customs. And that faith within the Maoists carried over to the end of the war, with the 2008 election to the Constituent Assembly being a victory for the newly legalized party, winning 220 seats compared to Congress's 110 and YMLE's 103. But the past 19 years has developed a new petty bourgeoisie, a middle class making up 25 to 30% of Nepal's population, born to a remittance-based economy, educated in English medium private schools, and developing a favorability towards Western-style liberal politics, due to the lack of a genuine revolutionary proletarian party. Nothing destroys the confidence of the middle classes in the working class as temporizing passivity and the absence of the will to struggle. The YMLE and Maoists' lack of commitment to the revolutionary cause and open corruption has caused massive polarization amongst the proletariat and the petty bourgeoisie against any form of socialism or Marxism. With this skepticism in place, the new petty bourgeoisie looked to new ideologies outside of mainstream Nepalese politics as a method of fighting back against the tri-party supremacy. With this has come the growth of Nepal's new liberal party, the Rashtriya Swatantra Party, who won 20 seats in the 2022 general election, and Nepal's premier Hindutva party, the Rashtriya Prajatantra Party, who won 14, a significant growth from the 1 seat they had won in 2017. But within Nepal exists two strands of Hindutva, a division which has helped mitigate the growth of a homogeneous national Hindutva movement. Found mainly within the Kathmandu Valley and the greater hill regions of Nepal is the royalist Hindutva. In the same way advocates for Hindutva created a myth of a Hindu India before the invasion of Muslims and Christians, so do the royal Hindutva advocates create a myth around the monarch as a stabilizing force that can save the country from the corruption of the tri-party elites. The RPP, who were reported to have accepted funding from India's BJP in 2023, advocate for the reinstatement of the Shah family as sovereigns of the nation and establish Nepal as a Hindu Rashtra, as well as xenophobia against Nepal's growing Christian population, with an indifference and sometimes positive relation with the local Muslim population. The second strand, found mainly at the Nepal-India border, the Tarai region, is the popular Hindutva. Indifferent to the establishment of the monarchy, this form of Hindutva is similar to the Indian variant, as its main focus is making Nepal into a hegemonic Hindu nation and fighting back against the Muslim threat. Due to the Tarai's close proximity with India, xenophobic conspiracies against the Muslim population have made their way into the local RPP rhetoric, as a local leader of Janakpur in the Madhya province attempted to whip up an outcry in the summer of 2023 over alleged instances of love jihad involving Hindu female students at a local college. When the National Party didn't support and parrot his xenophobic attacks against the Tarai Muslims, he referred to the RPP president, Rajendra Lingden, as a closet secularist who was actively trying to use the Muslims as a vote bank in the Tarai region, rather than launching an assault against them. But as they continue to organize these violent mass protests against the government, the despairing petty bourgeoisie sees in fascism above all a fighting force against big capital, and believes that, unlike the working class parties which deal only in words, fascism will use force to establish more justice. And as the lack of a revolutionary vanguard party leads to more of the petty bourgeoisie and proletariat towards the fascist Hindutva ideology, it wouldn't take much to create the conditions to unify these strands of Hindutva under a combined effort to establish the Hindu monarchy at the expense of Nepal's small, yet, in the eyes of the fascists, incredibly powerful religious minorities of Muslims and Christians in the same manner as that of India's BJP.